Welcome to the Send It Podcast. We are highlighting a bunch of South Dakota artists here in the next month. For those of you that have been listening and don't know, I live in Denver, Colorado, but my partner here, Wes Brown, actually lives in Rapid City. So he's been making the trek down to Denver so that we can talk to artists in Denver. But this time we're going to mix it up and highlight a bunch of phenomenal South Dakota artists. And this week we are in Lemmon, South Dakota, which is in the northwest corner of the state.
Central, really. I would say north central.
Okay. I stand corrected.
On the western side of the state, though. West River.
John, you want to weigh in?
I would say probably northwest.
Todd wins the Snickers bar in the truck.
Thank you, John. I paid John like $5 to say that. But so we are in Lemmon, South Dakota. It's a beautiful area. It's a small town of about 1,200 people. And we are in the Kokomo studio. It is the studio of John Lopez, who is an artist and sculptor. And he does incredible metal sculpture. John, thank you for being on the podcast and giving us this time today. I really appreciate it. Let's just start in and explain to our listeners exactly what you do, because you have a specific name for this metal sculpture that you do. So I'm going to let you define it and then describe what you do.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me on. Yeah, I am a sculptor primarily, and I create sculptures. Now, for the last 10 years, I've been creating sculptures out of found objects like scrap metal. I started out as a sculptor, sculpting in clay, and then casting sculptures into bronze. And that my love of sculpture started out with that melting metal and pouring it into this mold. And now I'm a fabricator, basically. And so it's a little different than sculpting with clay, because with clay, you can pretty much take off everything that you've just put on. You can take clay away as deep as you want to, but the scrap metal is very physical. There's a lot of welding and grinding and bending, and so yeah, I'm sculpting critters, bison, horses, moose, deer out of found objects and trying to make them look as real as possible.
And you have a specific term that you use to describe this.
Yes, I call the ones that I put my bronze casts in, I call it hybrid metal art, just because it's a hybrid of some cast pieces and then fabricated into all these other found objects. And a friend of mine, Dallery Davis, helped me kind of coin that term just to come up with a title that describes it the best way that we could. So hybrid metal art is, and that's what I'd like to call the ones that have these cast bronze pieces in them.
But you also do traditional bronze castings as well, correct?
I do. I've done 12 of the presidents in Rapid City. There's life-size presidents there. And I've done a couple of governors in Pierre, South Dakota. And so, yeah, I've done a lot of bronzes, actually. I used to sell a lot of tabletop Western bronzes. And then about 10 years ago, I transitioned into this scrap metal.
So give us a little bit of a backstory. Like, how were you always interested in art as a kid? You grew up here in rural South Dakota, and you grew up ranching. How does a kid from rural South Dakota decide he's going to be an artist? What was the catalyst that set you on this path?
My mom did a lot of painting and needlepoint kind of things as we were growing up. And we grew up kind of out in the middle of nowhere on a cow camp. I call it a cow camp. And my dad and some of our hired men, the cow camp is different than where my mom was, because the cow camp is usually just men, and then they're going around like the shepherds. They're the shepherd of the cattle. And so at cow camp, my dad and some of the hired men would take a 22 in the house out of boredom and target practice in the house, shooting at this big clump of wood, And then me being sixth grader or whatever, I would dig through that stump after they were done, and I would take all that lead and melt it down and pour it into a skull can lid, or try to make some. I always had this thing that I just wanted to make something or melt something, and it just, every time an opportunity came in front of me that, like a door, and I would just walk through it and just keep going to try to develop this gift. And so I've always been very creative, trying to draw. I did a lot of drawings as a kid, and I had a suitcase full of drawings, but the drawing never really was my gift until I found this, that I could sculpt in college. Then I really started to blossom, and sculpture was definitely my gift.
Your forte.
Right.
So when you went to college, was it Northern or Black Hills State at the time?
I went to Northern. I was going to be a school teacher, and then I changed my major to commercial art, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And one of my high school teachers here in Lemmon encouraged me and said, "You'd be a good commercial artist." So I didn't even know that wasn't even on my radar. And so when I went to school, I just said, well, I majored in commercial art, not knowing really what it was. And that was a really good choice, because now as a sculptor and as a business person, I use that commercial art thing to design brochures or just to market my work, basically. And so it's been really helpful in the marketing aspect. And so, yep, it was a required sculpture class at Northern State University. And we had a model come in, and we would study the proportions, because everyone is proportioned according to the size of your head. And, you learn these different techniques, I guess. And I just became fascinated with sculpting, and then we take it through the process and take this wax, and you put a ceramic shell over it, and you melt it out, pour bronze in, and then you break the shell away and you clean it up. And then you've got this thing made out of metal, So I was so pumped and so excited. Like the night before we'd cast our pieces at Northern, it was just like, I couldn't sleep because I was so worried that my piece was going to have a hole in it or something, and the bronze would just leak out, which does happen. Or if you drop it and it shatters. And all that stuff happened to me over time. And it was like the end of the world. One time I dropped a shell, and I had to, Lynn Carlsgaard, the sculpture teacher at Northern, he showed me how to patch it back up. Yeah, man, I was on fire for sculpture at that time.
That's pretty spectacular. And casting in bronze, it's a really difficult skill, correct?
It's very, there's a lot of steps to it, and there's a lot of labor, and it takes time to make the mold. You have to put one layer on it, like the rubber mold, and you take an air hose and you blow it into the detail so there's no little air bubbles, and then you put another layer on after that cures. So it's mold after mold and wax, and you have to really enjoy it, because after a while the process starts to weigh you down. And so then as I got into it further as a profession, I would hire some of these steps. I would hire a professional mold maker or hire a professional wax pourer. So then it would lighten my load a little bit, and I could do more creating and not be bogged down so much with the process.
Gotcha. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You have a formal education in art. Your degree is in art, you said, right?
It's commercial art.
Commercial art.
Yep. Mass communications, advertising.
How did you feel about that education that you got from the university? And I ask this question a lot, what do you think is a formal art education valuable?
I wouldn't have discovered my gift for sculpture had I not attended Northern State University. Having said that, I think that sometimes you have a gift, and you don't necessarily need to have formal training to get better at that gift, but you have to constantly be practicing and constantly build that gift. It's not just going to be there. And so I do credit going to the university for awakening this thing in me that I probably wouldn't have discovered. So yeah, I think it is important. I think that you have to pursue your gift, and you have to go at it kind of aggressively to find out what it is that you're good at. Because when I went to Northern State University, I probably thought I was going to be into drawing or photography more, and sculpture wasn't even like, I never even thought how anyone would make a sculpture. It wasn't even on my radar. And then it just opened up a whole new world. So I think you have to put yourself in different situations and positions that allow you to learn something new. And going to school is a good way to do that, or learning from another sculptor, getting a job with, but how would have I known to work for a sculptor? I didn't even know I was interested in it. So.
Right.
So part of the question that we talk about now, because art, going to art school can be relatively expensive. Did they give you kind of a business background too? Did you take business classes? Because I think at some of the schools, the business side is kind of just secondary, like you may have a course or so, but I was wondering if the state school like Northern was different.
There might have been a couple of required classes in there, but math is not one of my strong suits. So I would have avoided any kind of a business class at all costs, because it's like Latin, or, it's not something that I absorb very easily.
I can relate to that.
So no, being a commercial artist, I was going into commercial art and mass communications. So there really wasn't a business side to that.
Okay.
It was all, there wasn't a number crunching, but I learned, over the years, I've learned it on my own, just from making mistakes and
right.
things that work and things that don't.
The school of hard knocks,
right,
so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you also attended Black Hills State.
I went to Northern for a couple years, and I think I graduated from Northern with an associate's degree. And then I went to Black Hills State. My dad, now that I think about it, I just lost my dad here a couple weeks ago.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
And I'm just thinking, right now I'm just like, it's dawning on me that my dad sent me. He could see that this desire in me to want to be a sculptor or whatever. So he contacted the High Plains Heritage Center in Spearfish, and Leo Giacometto was the director there. And Leo was always trying to find a new person to nominate to honor at the High Plains Heritage Center, because it was a way for them to get money. Mm-hmm. And it was a way for them to keep history alive. And so they must have contacted my dad to want to put my grandpa Albert in this museum.
Oh,
so my dad remembered that, and he's like, well, we went to Leo Giacometto, and then Leo introduced me to Dale Lamphere. And so Dale helped me do this bronze bust of my grandpa Albert.
Oh, wow.
And
that's so cool.
So this bust was going to end up in the museum. And after everything was said and done, it didn't. But I then signed up for school in Spearfish at Black Hills State University. And then I was working with Dale Lamphere, and he was working on a piece at the High Plains Heritage Center in Spearfish. And so the ball was rolling.
Yeah. And Dale's done some amazing stuff.
He really has. And Dale has influenced me a lot. You talk about this hybrid metal art. I got the basic nucleus of that from Dale, because he's done pieces like that. And there's a piece at the library in Rapid City where the body is fabricated and then the face is cast. It's a blue stem woman, or I can't think, but it's a lady that's walking with a milk can or whatever. And so Dale loved to work with old wood pieces, and he used to do these fabricated pieces that were kind of like a bas relief. So working for him really did influence me a lot.
How long did you work with Dale?
I worked for him for a couple years. He was working on this Christ figure, the Resurrection, at the High Plains Heritage Center, and Jim Maher was his primary sculptor on that project. And so I worked with Jim on that, and we basically melted clay with little heaters and then smear this clay on this styrofoam form. And so, yeah, man, those were some big projects. And Dale wasn't afraid to take on some of these huge commissions.
Yeah. And Maher did some of the presidents along with, not with you, but some of the ones that you weren't doing, he was doing along with James Van Nuys and a couple other people. But
yep. Jim Maher, I've worked with him for a lot of years, and he's doing some molds for me now. I just saw him the other day and dropped a piece off for him to mold, and he's doing some of the governors in Pierre also. So yeah, we've worked together for quite a few years.
And he's in Belle-Fourche, right?
He is in Spearfish.
Spearfish. Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we all used to show up at some of the same art shows. We'd go to the Governor's Hunt art show in Pierre. There's a sculpture show in Hill City that we used to go to. So because of Dale Lamphere, and I would think, and Tony Kitka, there's a lot of sculptors that have gotten their start by working for Dale and Tony.
Yeah.
So you had a lot of opportunity presented to you that you were able to realize and take advantage of as far as setting you on this path. It sounds like your parents were very encouraging, that your dad had the foresight.
Yeah. And I think back on that and I'm just thinking, man, that was pretty weird that Dad set this thing up. And he's a cowboy. He doesn't know anything about machinery or tractors. We never had a shop. He just was a cowboy, and he knew good grass and good cattle and good horses. And so when I think back on him trying to find that opportunity for me, that was pretty cool. And he could see that this avenue, anyway, now that I look back, it's like all the pieces are coming together like, oh my gosh, he really did see that. And then my mom's parents, my mom come from the East Coast, and they helped me go to school and helped me get started. And then after I got a job and whatnot, then I paid for it myself. But yeah, if I think back on all the different people that have helped me, influenced me, and my parents have been very supportive, that helps a lot.
At what point did you decide that, hey, I've had all this great opportunity. I've worked with these phenomenal sculptors. But at what point did you say, you know what? I think I'm ready to just do my own thing. What was that catalyst?
It took a while, because in the bronze world, when you go to a lot of these bronze shows, there's a lot of copying going on. And if somebody shows up with an otter chasing a fish the next year, and if it sells really well, everybody will have an otter chasing a fish.
Everybody's chasing the cell or the fish.
Right. Or the mountain, or what is it? A bobcat. He's swooping in, and the bunny rabbit swooping out. And oh my gosh, and I fell into that. You're trying to find something that will sell because you're trying to make a living. But at the same time, you're trying to be an artist. And so it's like, what comes first, the money or the creativity? What are you going to be more faithful to, yourself as an artist and a creator, or are you going to let what people want to buy dictate what you do? So, man, that's been a ongoing struggle. But after I did some of the presidents in Rapid City, then I had the financial stability that I could kind of branch out and take some risks with this scrap metal stuff. And I'd seen other scrap metal sculptures at Loveland, at one of the sculpture shows that they have in Loveland, Colorado. And I was really taken with it. And my dad's super fascinated with old scrap metal and antiques and stuff. So my Aunt Effie, my dad's sister, was very interested in me, and she's a school teacher, and she would have me come to her school and give talks to the kids and do a talk in front of the whole school. Now that I think back, it's like how boring that probably was to those kids, but she thought that they needed to see this, and they could learn something from me, or it was good for me too, for my speaking ability. So anyway, we lost Effie in a bad car wreck. Gosh, it's been over 10 years ago. And so then that's when I changed my style of work from just doing the bronze castings into doing the scrap metal. I moved down to live with her husband and help developed this cemetery that he wanted to bury her on the ranch. And she didn't want to be buried on the ranch. They had this kind of relationship where she wanted something and then Gino would just do the opposite. And so I knew we weren't going to change Gino's mind. And so I moved down there. It just kind of happened. Gino needed me. I needed him. And so they started building a cemetery. And so then I just started helping with it. And this gate kind of came out of it. And I started making this like a cross on a gate. And then I made an angel on top of the gate out of just stuff that Gino had lying around in his shop. And then that's how the scrap metal thing started. I thought, you know what, that came together so cool. I'm going to try and do a horse. And I'd always, in the back of my mind, kind of been fascinated with the scrap metal stuff anyway. So that was the catalyst. Uncle Gino, and he had scrap metal coming out of his ears. And he had a welder. And he loved the fact that I was there. Her favorite nephew was there, and it made him feel good. So I stayed there with him for 4 years and just poured myself into the scrap metal stuff. That's when my art career really started taking off, because then I was doing something that really stood out. And I was just doing what I felt I wanted to do. And thank goodness that it caught fire. You know, it's luck in a lot of ways. You don't know what you're going to do that is going to register, or that the public's going to take a hold of it and run with it. So I feel very blessed to have had those 4 years that I could be down there and I was getting kind of burnt out of the bronze thing. So I was looking for a new medium. Yeah, that was a very interesting time in my life.
Now, prior to this, did you have welding skills prior to taking on this kind of sculpture?
I owned a TIG welder, and I TIG welded a lot of my bronzes. I didn't have a lot of MIG experience, though, the wire feed. I had just a little bit in high school, so I wasn't real confident. But Gino had a hired man there that would kind of, I don't know if he gave me the basics or whatever, but basically you pull a trigger on a wire feed welder and you just learn what'll hold and what won't. So anybody out there that wants to do some welding, wire feed welding is very easy to do. It's user friendly. And so like I said, my dad didn't have a shop, so we didn't have a welder and a place where I could do a lot of that kind of stuff, just because we lived on a cow camp. But we had an ag class in Lemmon here, and they taught welding. And so that was important step in my life.
Yeah, and I bet you there's a lot of trial and error with different metal types and how to adhere them to the other types of metal.
Yeah, there is. There's a lot of some pieces are hardened, some pieces are mild steel, some are cast iron, and some things, like if it's galvanized and you go to weld it, and this just poisonous white stuff will come up out of it. So you got to be wearing a mask. And I've learned, Jack Parks is a blacksmith in Piedmont, and he taught me how to weld some of this stuff. If you preheat some of that spring iron has a springiness to it, or a hardened, if you preheat it and then weld it and then heat it up again, cherry red, then the weld is less likely to crack. And so I learned different things along the way, and you learn what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, a lot of technique, a lot of trial and error. Yeah,
right.
That's interesting. Yeah.
You talk about making this gate to the cemetery. Did you start out on a smaller scale? Because if you look at John's website, johnlopezstudio.com, while you're listening to this, you'll see most of what you see on his website are large scale sculptures, and they're phenomenal. So did you start small and then branch out to these bigger pieces, or did you just say, I'm just going for it, I'm going to start doing these and just figure it out along the way?
You know, the first piece I did was an angel that was probably 20 inches tall. And then the second thing I did was a horse head that was like a life-size horse head, maybe a little smaller than a life-size horse head. And then after that, I think I did this, a T-Rex. I found this piece in my sister Noelle and her husband Randy Benson. They live up here in North Dakota. I was going through one of their scrap metal piles, and I found this thing that looked like a T-Rex leg, and inspired me to do this T-Rex. So I start doing this T-Rex is like the third piece I did. So I went big pretty fast. And now 10 years later, I will do a small model first in clay. But then I just was so excited, I just started in. And by the time I got done with that T-Rex, that piece that inspired me was completely covered. You couldn't even see it because it, when you stand back, it really has to look like a T-Rex, or it has to have that life to it. And ultimately, the little piece that you used in there doesn't really matter. It's the big picture when you stand back. So I learned right away there not to fall in love with any particular piece that I'm welding on there, because in the end, it's probably going to be covered up. And if I'm a good sculptor, I'm going to let the sculpture speak to me and let it become what it's going to become, and not be like, yeah, but that scissors that my grandma gave me is getting covered up. And, you got to hold the good stuff towards the end, and then maybe try a way to fit it in there later.
And I laugh at that because, you want to step back and look at the art as a whole piece, but then you go in and you find all these little hidden things, like a pair of scissors or whatever, that you're like, oh my God, that's a pair of scissors. And so it's just fascinating. You got discs that make up, and you can see it's, the discs I'm looking at this pair of buffalo that are charging each other. And a lot of the body parts are big agricultural implement items like discs and what they use to tear up the soil. And then, and then chains and scrap metal that's been formed to certain shapes. And then the bronze pieces that you talked about that, like what I'm looking at is Custer and I believe Sitting Bull. And they're just absolutely gorgeous, and then they're just placed inside this buffalo. It's just amazing. So it's just
funny.
My
My mom, she usually is here in the summertime when the gallery is open, and she does a talk, and it's kind of fun to listen to her describe this piece. Or people will ask, well, what was John thinking? Or how long did it take him? And she loves just sitting here and visiting with people. And so she tells the story of the Battle of the Little Bighorn, and Sitting Bull was a medicine man from Bullhead, South Dakota. And that's right where I grew up, is Bullhead, South Dakota. And he's got a little metal arc here, Sitting Bull, hiding under his headdress, kind of on his shoulder there, that is a part of, if you've read about Sitting Bull, he could speak to animals, and a metal arc at one point sat on his shoulder and told him something. And then the soldiers falling out of the sky, and there's an eagle in each buffalo, and the two men are looking at each other through these buffaloes. So the idea actually came about because of another piece that I had did, and it inspired a couple of my friends in a discussion we were having after an art show. And Kevin Donahue said, well, wouldn't it be cool to do two buffalo and have Custer in one and Sitting Bull in the other one? And Michael Van Beek was there. And so it was kind of cool for this, when this idea came about, and then I sculpted it out in clay and really tried to play around with it. And so it took me about 4 years to do this piece.
Wow.
But there were several pieces that I had done before it that kind of preceded it that I didn't really know it would turn into what it did. But yeah, it's a dynamic sculpture. It has a lot going on and a lot of stories in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the falling soldiers, obviously a vision that Sitting Bull had prior to the Battle of Greasy Grass, or what we know as Little Bighorn. So yeah, that's interesting that you incorporate that. And I was looking at, there's an eagle, and then he's got a skull in his talons, and it's just, and then a leaf on the other side.
Yep.
So
The eagle that is on Sitting Bull's bison has a skull in one talon, and that represents the death that they suffered from the battle. And then the leaf is like a peace offering or a piece of nature that, I don't know, part of me wanted to have this eagle have a olive branch kind of a thing, represent nature, and like they're fighting for their home. They're not just there to kill someone. They're really fighting for something, that meant a lot to them. And then there's a little turtle also in the eagle's talon there. And then in the eagle that's on Custer's bison also has a skull that represents the death on that side of the battle. And there's a couple arrows that missed Custer's head that have kind of hit behind the eagle there. There's a train that represents the westward expansion that came after Custer discovered gold in the Black Hills. And so with this piece, I really tried to put a lot of this different stories in it. And I don't do that with every piece. Sometimes it's just a fun sculpture to look at. But this friend of mine, Kevin Donahue, was really trying to push me to have more of a
narrative of
some
sort.
Yeah. And so I ended up doing a lot of pieces after that tell more of a story, and everything that I put in there had more to do with the theme of what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been an evolution to, after I would do a piece and something would work on that piece, and I would take that element and take it into another piece and just keep trying things, and it just keeps growing and turning into a style of artwork that I hope keeps changing and becoming something that I don't even know what it'll be.
Right. Right.
That's the fun part of being an artist.
Yeah.
Sculptor.
When you're looking at this, especially this one, cause I'm sitting here like looking at the different elements, it is definitely a narrative. And if you just sit there and just look at everything, it's telling a story. So you definitely accomplish that. It's just absolutely gorgeous work.
And the most important thing is the energy that the piece has when you first see it, when you first walk in the room, and to try to get these two buffalo to really be fighting and pushing, and one of them's winning and one of them's, fighting to hold his ground. And there's a lot of different elements. So it was a battle. That piece was a battle to try to, in that oil well pipe that I used for the armature and for the legs and stuff is really heavy and hard to move. And it's physically demanding to do these pieces as well.
When you do something on this scale, do you hire people to come in and help you? You were talking about this oil pipe that was really heavy to negotiate. Do you work with assistants, or is it just you just doing your thing?
It's just me doing my thing. And I've figured out little tricks of how to handle these heavy pieces by myself. And you learn fulcrum, you just learn different things that you can do to prevent having to ruin your back trying to lift something. But I've had different people work for me over the years in little bits and pieces here and there, but it works better for me to be alone and just really let the whole process speak to me. And when someone else is there, it kind of changes it, and it's not quite the same. Mm-hmm. And then they might suggest, well, what about putting a little piece right here? And then that kind of changes it. So it's better if I'm alone.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Have you ever got to a process where, and then you're like, oh, this isn't working, and like have to start all over?
Yeah. That's a hard time because I'm depressed and I'm just thinking, this piece is just going to look like a pile of crap and I hate it. And if I don't cut that off and start over, it is just going to be a miserable uphill battle. So I've learned now that when something isn't working, just quit and try it again.
Yeah.
Because if you're fighting it, you gotta either quit working on that piece and go start something else and come back to it. So that happens a lot. There's a lot of little battles that you have with different aspects of it.
Yeah, we were interviewing Michael Untied. He's a Western painter down in Denver, and he was talking like sometimes he'll get frustrated and just set it aside for months on end before he'll ever go back to it. And and sometimes I think he even said like he was willing just to throw in the towel, like I don't know how to paint anymore. And then all of a sudden, he comes back to it and creates this just absolutely gorgeous oil painting. It's just great. But
what helps me is if I'll go on a scrap iron hunt and I'll find some new stuff, then that will really invigorate the process, because it's like I've got something new to work with and some new material, and it kind of excites me again.
So when you're beating your head against the wall on a piece, you step away, go pick some scrap, and kind of clears your head, and you come back with a fresh perspective.
Yeah, I'm working on a tree right now. I'm thinking about calling it the tree of life, and it's made out of scrap metal. And I'm kind of obsessed with trees, and it's just this old, looks like it's 1,000 years old, and it's twisting and turning, and it's not growing straight. It looks like one of those old olive trees you might see in Italy that's hundreds of years old. And so the other day I decided to just go for a drive. This guy from McLaughlin called me and said that he had some scrap metal and could I come and look through it? And I wasn't in the mood at that time to do it, but I thought, I just woke up one day and I just started driving, and my brother was giving me directions how to get there. And so I'm walking through his stuff, not even sure if it's really his place, and I'm waiting for someone to show up and be like, what are you doing here? With a gun or something.
Right.
So then after my brother assured me I was at the right place, I'm walking along and I see this barrel full of these glass insulators. Remember those electric, what a Highline pole used to have, these glass insulators. And I was like, oh my gosh, those would be perfect for the fruit on this tree. And they would have like a glisten to them, in this, I'm building this tree for a sculpture garden here at the Kokomo. And so that was just like changed everything for that tree, because then now I can use glass in it. And I love those times when you are looking for new material, and then it's just like it changes the whole piece.
So I want to talk a little bit about that. When, obviously you said your dad didn't even have implements, and then you went to your uncle's house, had a ton of scrap metal. So when you're scrounging around, when you first started scrounging around for metal, were the farmers and ranchers kind of like reluctant? And now has it changed where they're like calling you and say, hey, I got all this stuff. Do you want to use it?
I had been a sculptor professionally for 10 years before that. And so people were kind of familiar with the fact that I was creating things, and I'm always unveiling a new piece. And in my hometown, I'll unveil a piece there during the big celebration. So people were kind of used to the idea. And a lot of times people that I grew up with or whatever will come up and say, well, I got, some stuff you might be interested in, or I'll get a telephone call, and I might not even really know who the person is, but they know who I am because they bought a horse from my dad 30 years ago or something. And so they are excited to be a part of it. They want you to use some of their pieces, and they want me to come through and look through their pile before the big farm auction, and somebody else buys it and just throws it in the back of the shed, So people have really embraced it, and I think they get a kick out of seeing their pieces in the sculpture when it's finished. And Ray Johnson is from McLaughlin, and I remember him calling me before this big farm auction, and he took me through, and he was very emotional and try not to cry. I had someone there videoing to document it, And so it meant a lot to me that he wanted to be there and see what I took, but he didn't, I could have took anything. And when it's all said and done, I don't really end up taking that much, but just pieces that I think will look cool in the sculpture and whatever. So yeah, that's part of the process, is meeting these characters that have this scrap metal that you don't throw it away, or you think you might use it someday, and before you know it, you've got a whole ranch full of scrap metal. So I think they get a kick out of it. They like the history of these different pieces and what it reminds them of. And that's the other side to these pieces, is that each one of these pieces that comes from the tractor or a shovel, or they've had another life, they've had another use, they have another story. And so that adds to the meaning, another layer. And I like that aspect of it.
Yeah. The connection that you have to history, the past, that you're incorporating into something new that would otherwise just be sitting there on somebody's land, rusting away or whatever. But you're incorporating the community that you live in, that you've grown up in, and that into these sculptures. This is really part of the community.
Yeah, sometimes when I get commissioned to do a piece for a community, they'll people will be invited to give something that they have just lying around that they would like to be a part of the project. Or so when I did this cowboy riding the walleye in Mobridge, there were folks that would bring barrels of different things and sometimes some of the pieces I could use and sometimes I couldn't use them. So I think that piece has a different meaning to them when they can say, well, I helped donate some of the materials for that piece.
It gives a community buy-in into the project.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think that's a fun element to these pieces for sure.
So the cowboy riding the walleye, obviously that's an interesting piece, and it's pretty large if I'm not mistaken, right?
It's 12 feet tall. I mean, that doesn't sound very tall, but it's big. It's one of the bigger pieces I've done.
Yeah. Was that your idea, or was it discussed by the community, or how?
It wasn't my idea, but I wish it was. When it first came about, these ladies, Faye Jackman and another gal, had this idea to do this sculpture, and it was their idea, or it was this other gal's idea to do the cowboy riding the walleye. And when my brother and my mom and different people heard the idea, they were just like, "You're not going to do that, are you? That sounds horrible. It sounds just cheesy." And I thought, I don't know. I kind of like it. If I do it like it's a bucking horse and it's like he's in the rodeo and the fish is a saddle bronc, I think I can make it kind of cool. And so I was on board for it. And different people, I think, people in Mobridge were kind of like, I don't know how this thing is going to turn out. So I'm glad they love it now, but kind of working up to it, I think there was a lot of doubters, but the piece speaks for itself now. It's like, okay, I get it.
Yeah. No, it's fun. I like it. And I don't think I would have ever, I'm always talking about the creative aspect in people and where your creativity comes from, but I would have never thought of that. Who would have thought about putting it?
Well, and it's an interesting, Mobridge has an interesting mix of cultures. They've got the fishing because they're on the Missouri River. There's a lot of cowboy, really backwoodsy kind of real cowboy thing going on there. I don't know how to describe it, but some of the cowboys from Mobridge are there, and some of them are from the reservation, so some of them are part Indian. So there's that aspect, and you're on the reservation, so you've got all these different cultures in this one place, and you want to include everyone. So I tried to do that with this piece. I put an eagle feather in the cowboy's hat to represent the Native American cowboys, and there's different things in the piece that you can go up and identify with. So when a community comes to me and says, we want a sculpture that represents our community, you have to try to pull all that different stuff out of the woodwork and make it work.
We talked about earlier how sometimes you step away from the piece, and you alluded to the fact that then you go and work on something else. Do you have multiple projects going on at any given time?
Yes, you should see my shop right now. I have a tiger that I'm doing for Mobridge. I have an Arabian horse that I'm doing for this show in Qatar that is coming up in the fall. I'm doing a tree. I have a drover that's got to go to a hotel in Fort Worth. So I have way too many things going on. And it's actually kind of overwhelming to walk into my shop and be just like, which one of these am I going to work on today? So sometimes I have to take a piece out and just put it outside just to get it out of my sight.
Out of your sight?
Yeah. But I think sometimes I get really excited when I first start a piece, and then I'll start another piece, and I feed off of that excitement to try to start as many pieces as possible, because some days it's just like pushing a log chain. The creativity is not happening. So you have to take advantage of that spark. When it comes, you got to run with it.
And we've discussed this before, so and Wes probably knows where I'm going with this, but so what do you do in those moments where, and every creative person and artist goes through this, but there's days where you're not feeling it. what do you do to make yourself go in there and do the work that needs to get done?
I pretty much force myself to go in there and I just do it. I just make myself do it because as a professional, I do it as a profession because I feel guilty. Like if I sit around and I'm just thinking, I'm just waiting for lightning to strike. And then I'm just thinking, my dad would be standing over me like, get outside and do something. So I just go out, and even if it's wrong, I do it. Or I can come to the Kokomo and I can do something. I can plant some trees or some flowers, or if, especially if it's in the summertime, or go ride my horse. And so in the summer, it's a lot easier, but in the wintertime, there isn't a lot of other things to distract you. So I just make myself go and do it.
Do you run cattle too? Do you have a ranch?
I only have a little 14-acre little
Okay.
ranchette. I have a couple horses and a couple peacocks.
Yeah, they're interesting.
They are. They keep me entertained.
My next question for you is, if you were to work it out percentage wise, what percentage of your work is stuff that's being commissioned by someone or an entity, and how much is just stuff that you're just creating on your own and then you find a seller for it or somebody sees it and wants to buy it?
Well, I would say 90% of what I'm doing now is commission work, but I would like to flip that and be doing 90% of stuff that I want to do. But it's a slippery slope. You gotta keep the money rolling in. And I've been saying no to a lot of, or I don't know if I've been saying no, but I just haven't been answering my emails. So yeah, you never know when it's going to quit, when the phone's going to stop ringing, or you think, man, I better take this commission because scrap metal art might be out of style in another month or whatever. You just don't know. I've been very fortunate that I can also do, like this tree I'm working on is something I've wanted to do. So sometimes I'll just put everything aside and just work on something that I want to. And that's another thing that I have to do. Like you said, when the creativity isn't coming, I have to start a new piece and then
Work on something that really jazzes you
Right.
to kind of get the juices
Right.
flowing again.
Exactly. So I've just spent 3 months on this tree, and I've done this before on other pieces. That I've got a piece out front here that looks like a dinosaur egg. And I'm thinking I could have been working on something really cool. And everyone in town is confused by this dinosaur egg, but I have to push myself to do new things because you never know what domino that's going to hit. And then that, so.
Yeah, as an artist, you have to be open to the experience, right?
Right.
Because you never know, and you've experienced it multiple times. We've talked about it already in this conversation. You never know what that thing is going to be, that catalyst that's going to kind of set you down this other path and go, oh, wow, now I'm going to do this.
Yeah, there's different textures, different techniques that I've learned on pieces that might not have been successful. People might not notice them or think that they're really successful, but I noticed that there was a technique that I did in this piece, in this dinosaur egg, that I'm going to use on another piece. That's how you grow as an artist. You just have to keep creating and keep doing and keep welding and keep sculpting, and you get better and better. And you have to step away from it too. And I'm not very good at that. I need a vacation. So that would probably help if I would go to Hawaii for a couple months and then come back and be like, whoa, I'm really jazzed. Now I'm going to finish this stuff. I need to be better at that.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you were working on a piece for an exhibition in Qatar, and you were part of this exhibition in Qatar this past fall.
That's
correct?
our fire whistle, by the way. We still have a noon whistle here.
Oh, okay, nice. I noticed it, and I was like,
Or
do I
it's
want to
not
say
the
something?
fire whistle, it's the noon whistle.
It's the noon whistle. Everybody go to lunch.
How did you get invited to be a part of that show?
I had an email from this Souk Waqif art center And I get a lot of weird emails, and I get stuff from Dubai and Qatar. And I've had like the World Cup want me to do something. And then there was someone in Dubai wanted me to make the world's largest scrap metal tower. And so I get a lot of weird, and you never know if it's real or if it's what's going on. So I kind of ignored that email thinking that this isn't real or this isn't going to happen or whatever. And it's expensive to ship your work that far. And I get a lot of calls from this trade show that wants me to come and show over there. But I don't know how I would make enough money to ship the piece there. And then, so a lot of times the logistics, I'm just thinking, you know what? I'm not even going to do this thing. And so one of my friends, Cindy Chin from Nebraska, she's an artist. And she said, well, I got invited to go to this too, and I'm going. And so I was like, all right, well, so I took it seriously and I started boxing up a couple of my pieces here. And I had a life-size bison that I was working on, and I pushed myself to finish that. And I think what they did was they picked artists that were active on Instagram or on social media. And so when I got to this show and my work is there, I recognized a lot of the different artists were some of my friends from Instagram, and we all kind of knew of each other. We had never met in person or really talked, but we kind of had seen their work. So yeah, it was surreal because they paid for the shipping. They paid for everything. And they just wanted this, and to walk into this tent of all these scrap metal artists, it was really cool. And so I was super honored to be a part of that. And I had 3 or 4 pieces there. I had my steampunk owl. I had this life-size bison and a horse that I had done for Hermès. And so it was cool to be there for 2 weeks, and I learned a lot about their culture, and it was a lot less intimidating than I thought it was going to be. I was kind of scared at first, but after a while, they were so accommodating, and they really wanted us to be there and encouraged me to wear my cowboy hat because they wanted to have this feeling at the art show that it was an international, they were drawing international artists. So it was a game changer that now they're talking about doing it again next year. So I'm trying to think of things that I can make that fit that culture a little better than.
Mm-hmm. Did you find that your stuff stood out differently from the other artists that were there, or?
It did, just because the bison was life size and it was huge. So they gave me the number one spot, and I was very honored.
Wow.
And I don't really know why this is happening or why that happened, but they were very familiar with my work and they wanted me there. And as they did these other artists too, they paid for all of their shipping too.
Wow.
So yeah, the first thing people saw when they came in was this life-size bison, and they'd come over and bison. And, there were some other artists there from Russia, and every time I would come up to them, they'd say, Mr. President. And I don't quite know what that meant, but I think it was like they were saying, we really like your work. Your work is awesome. We've seen your work before, that kind of thing.
Right.
So we use Google Translate a lot those couple weeks.
Now, these pieces from all these artists that were invited to be part of this exhibit, were they for sale?
They were all for sale. Yep. And different people would come through and buy pieces throughout the show. And then when it was all said and done, anything that hadn't sold, this art center bought. They bought everything.
So essentially, all those pieces you made
Stayed
money
there.
on.
Yep.
And you didn't have to pay for shipping.
Right.
To get it over there.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I think Doha is growing so fast, and they got the World Cup in 2 years, 2023, and I think they're trying to become an international city like New York, Las Vegas. Dubai they're competing with Dubai, and so they're just doing what they can to try to have as much culture and as much interesting things, to try to draw people in for tourism and different things. So to change the image.
And they had the foresight to go, the way that we do this to make this place more appealing and as a destination place and more cosmopolitan is to bring in art.
Yep. And artists that are active on social media, because now after I've posted on my Instagram and they've all posted on their Instagram, oh, Doha is great. Oh, this was awesome. So the word kind of spreads from there.
We're talking about social media. You're obviously very active on social media. How do you go about utilizing that as an artist?
Yeah, social media really, if you're an artist and you're trying to find your place in the art world, you've almost got to be pushing your work on Instagram, or I think Instagram is where it's at right now. I'm not real good about keeping up with I have some younger friends that tell me all this stuff. But yeah, I try. And it kind of comes to me naturally because I like taking pictures of my work and I like promoting. So it's a good way to stay out in front of people. And I think there's a lot of people that follow my work are welders, people that like making sculptures out of whatever, welding, scrap metal or whatever. So those are a lot of my followers. And then just people that are inspired by art. And I don't have it figured out by any means, but I love making short little videos and editing videos. I think if I wasn't a sculptor, I'd probably be into making movies or editing or something like that. So I like to play around with that, and it kind of breaks up the day to make a cute little video or something. And yeah, it's a very important aspect of staying relevant. And that's how I got invited to the show in Doha. I mean, they went on Instagram and picked the best artists that were doing the kind of artwork they were looking for. And
that's how they found you.
Yep.
You were off to the races. That's pretty spectacular. So let's talk about pricing. So how do you go about pricing a commission? Do you base it on the scale of it? Do you base it on time? All of those factors? How do you go about going, okay, this is how much this is going to cost you for this buffalo? Or
there's kind of a standard thing, a standard market. Like when I started off in the bronze industry, so you do a life-size person. When 10 years ago, a life-size bronze of a portrait of somebody, a full body bronze, would go for $50,000. So you're taking in what it cost you to make it times 3. Okay, so that's kind of the standard thing for a bronze sculptor. And a lot of artists ask me this question, how do I price my work? And if it's not selling, you gotta sell it. You gotta change the price and sell it and move on. So when I first started, I would do whatever I needed to do to make things happen. So I can price my stuff the way I want now because my work is in demand. But when you're first starting, you got to do what you got to do to sell it. And you just find out what the market will stand or what, so you got to stick to your guns. If you really want that certain price, stick to your guns. But if it never sells, well, it's probably not worth that. So I started out kind of copying how the bronze industry would, a certain size, like a life-size bison, what they would charge for that. And even though I don't have the expense of a mold, the wax pouring, or the bronze, these pieces are very labor intensive. And there's a lot of thought and a lot of time. It takes me 6 months to do one. So it's a hard thing how to price it, but I think I'm in the right range. A lot of different people tell me I could charge more, but I want to keep pieces moving. Mm-hmm. I want to keep things rolling. So this is another question I ask. What is kind of like the starting price for a original John Lopez sculpture, and what does it go up to? The starting is about $50,000.
Okay.
I don't want to get out of bed for anything less than that.
Gotcha. And you're because of what you do, you're different than some of the other artists that we've talked previous. So we have painters that do, like the size of this notebook, like 5x7, that they'll do little paintings like that, and they can knock them out in a couple days, a bunch of them, and they'll sell them for $100. And so when they need cash, they can generate some cash flow by having this available, something for everybody. But you're totally different in that, you said the majority of your work is commissioned. So, and these are large scale pieces. So I had to ask that question just because it's a whole different ball of wax,
I burn out really quickly. So if I had to do 100 little men made out of bolts, that would not be good. I can barely get myself to finish the pieces that I have, let alone a bunch of little smaller things. But I started out doing small bronzes. And I would do anything. I would go to any show, any chamber mixer. I would take my work and I would show it. I would set up in a gas station if I had to get people's attention. And so I really hustled. And the funny thing is, I could have hustled and I did. And my work wasn't, I had a gift, but my work wasn't good enough to where it was really going to catch fire. I would have just kept spinning my wheels with the bronze thing. But when I started doing the stuff that really caught fire, then you don't have to go to every chamber mixer and you don't have to go to every trade show. You just stick to what you're good at. Once you find it and really develop that. So I can't remember what the question was, but I know that. What was the question?
Well, we were talking about, having different price points for your art, but because of what you do and because of the scale of it and because it's commissioned, it's a whole different game. So
yeah. And I kind of know where I'm at compared to other people that are doing this.
Do you commiserate with other artists that do something in the same vein, or not really?
No,
you just
but I know there really isn't anybody else that can do what I can do. Mm-hmm. And then I have enough commissioned pieces that if somebody wants me to do something that I don't really want to do, then I'll just say no, because I've got enough pieces to do,
You're in that position where you can say, that's not really what I do, or that's not something I'm interested in.
But when you're hungry and you want something really bad, you'll do whatever you have to do it. So thank goodness I'm not in that position, but who knows what tomorrow will bring.
That's for all of us.
I'll be making sculptures out of tumbleweeds probably when it's all said and done, but I'll figure it out. You have to be able to do whatever it takes. I think that's been a big part of my success is you have to try everything. And when everything doesn't work, you have to keep trying.
So my next question is this. Here you are in this small town in South Dakota. You are now an international artist. What keeps you here in Lemmon, South Dakota?
I think it's part of what makes my pieces work is that what inspires me is here. The thing that inspires me is this place. This is home. This is where my parents are, where my siblings are, the ranch life. And I always felt, whenever I left home, I always felt this calling to come home. And I just wanted to be home. This opportunity to set up a studio and a sculpture garden on Main Street just kind of happened. It presented itself, and I'm going with it just to see what's going to become of it. And it gives my mom something to do in the summertime. It gives me something to do when I want to get away from the shop. And I get to meet the public and interact with the public. Yeah, this is my home, I guess. I love the Grand River. I love cottonwood trees, the grass and the wildlife. And I know I could go and live anywhere else and it would just keep pulling me back home. And then I live in a paradise of iron.
Well, it's your palette. I mean, like painters dip into different colors of ink. You're harvesting your palette in the local communities. So
yeah, if I was in Italy, I'd be carving stuff out of Italian marble. If I was in California, I'd be probably carving wood. You got to go with the materials that you have available to you. I think it's part of my story. It's part of John Lopez is being in South Dakota and collecting the pieces from the guy that I went to high school with or used to go to brandings with, or, I have a history with a lot of the people that I'm getting these materials from.
And so you feel strongly about that history?
Definitely. I think that a lot of the subject matter that I choose to do, from Hugh Glass to Sitting Bull to Ed Lemmon, I think it's my job to flesh those stories out so that people that are coming through here, if you don't have a visual, a mural or a sculpture or a painting or a book that says, hey, this thing happened here, then you don't really know. You're just going through a town that's just like every other town. So I enjoy the challenge of, what can I do to make Lemmon a better place? What can I do to make the world a better place? So I'm on the Lemmon Economic Development here in town, and we go through the town and try to make decisions on how to make improvements. And since I started the Kokomo here, we tore down the old Jerry's Hardware buildings that was just south of me, and deciding to renovate another building that's south of that one, and which ones can be saved, which ones need to come down, and how can we inspire the young generation to do that,
to preserve
when it's their turn.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, history is so important. And I think that people are interested in history.
They are. They don't know it sometimes, but when you present it to them, they go, oh,
yeah,
wow,
It's funny how some people will come in and they know the story of Custer. I mean, they know exactly what the gun should look like. They know what era. So people surprise you sometime when they come in. They're super excited, and then some people aren't as excited, and my mom doesn't like that. She likes only the people that are really excited.
I like your mom.
Yep, she keeps things interesting. So we meet all people from all over the world, actually, that come to the Kokomo, and it's not a huge thing yet. It's not become this big, overwhelming thing yet, but I hope someday that people will come to the Kokomo or to Lemmon to see something that they haven't seen before, or something that it's a destination to experience.
I think that's incredibly admirable what you're doing. You could, like we discussed, you could go anywhere, but this is home. This is where you choose to live and work, and you want to give back to your community and see it thrive. Whereas so many other people, they just kind of give up on it and say, well, we're moving on. We're going someplace else. And I was watching CBS Sunday Morning last week, and they had Mike Wolf from American Pickers on there. And one of the things that he has done is not only buy up places in the town in Iowa where he's from and renovate them and preserve them, but he's doing it in other towns. And one of the things that kind of stuck with me, and being here in Lemmon, he said, if you want to see small town America, you need to go see it now, because it's fast disappearing. You need to get in your car and drive and do a road trip. He said, because they're tearing down buildings right and left. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that he's doing with all this money that he's made from his TV show and his business and so forth is he's buying up all these places in these small towns and renovating them and making them, giving them new life, which I think is pretty spectacular.
Yeah, it is. That's an admirable thing, because, just look at Lemmon. Some of the most interesting buildings that we had, some of the most interesting architecture is gone. So yeah, once it's gone, it's too late. Yeah. It's better to try to save some of that history and Todd and Judy Larson, they started a makerspace placemakers group here, and they have they're musicians and they have a band, and all these different creative types come to this placemakers meetings, and we have painting classes here at the Kokomo Forum, and they put on different classes. And so there's a lot happening, and we renovated our theater and try to have live theater and where the movies are played. And so we're trying, Lemmon's trying. And I'm really proud of the different things that have come up in the last couple of years. And I see that it's turning into something. And we just need to get our momentum going and see where it goes.
And you've done it with the Kokomo, because this used to be a bar, I think you said?
Yes, this was a bar, and the roof was completely rotten and leaking, and it was just a moldy old mess. And so I put a new roof on it, and I think a lot of people in town thought, what in the world is he doing? Because I'm not a carpenter, but I did take building trades in high school here. So I knew enough that I could find somebody that would know how to put a rafter up or something. Anyway, I'm glad it paid off, because it was a gamble. One of the walls could have fell in and it had all been over with. But it was a worthwhile thing to do. And the Kokomo has a loving place in people's hearts here in Lemmon because of all the stories and experiences that they had here. They used to get a good burger here, and it was a 3-2 bar. And so kids from North Dakota could come over here and drink. And the Kokomo has a long history. Sometimes people will be wearing one of the t-shirts in an airport in Denver or something, and somebody will come and say, "Oh my gosh, is the Kokomo still a thing?" So it's kind of a famous little bar in its own way. But so yeah, I think the Kokomo, renovating it and doing something here on Main Street has jump-started something here in Lemmon, and I'm hoping that it'll do more. We can do more things.
Yeah. So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So I just wanted to ask, so do you think the eco trends that we have, does that, and repurposing stuff, do you see that as a driving factor for, interest in your art? Or
I think that, yeah, the timing of my work and how it's taking off right now in the art world has something to do with that, the recycling type of thing. It's not something that I set out to do.
Right.
I just am using stuff that there's a lot of scrap metal around here, so I use it. But I think it does fit into what's going on right now with the green movement and recycling and reusing and upcycle and that kind of thing. So I'll take it. I'll take
it wherever you can.
Yeah.
So going on with marketing, the other thing I wanted to talk about is you published a book of your artwork or your sculptures. How has that been received? And was that a good idea? Because, sometimes publishing can be expensive. And what was your, I guess, hope behind it?
I always have this, I don't know. I did these calendars. I started off building a calendar with my artwork, and those were so popular. And even now I put all my money into publishing this book, so I don't do the calendars anymore. And people still come up and say, "Do you do the calendar?" So I don't know. I'm just kind of fascinated with taking pictures of my work and trying to find different ways to, so I knew, because the calendars were so popular, that a book would probably be good. And I started small. I did a small book called In Fields of Iron, which just looks like a glorified pamphlet. And then went into this other, this book that went more into detail. And I hired Kristen Donnan to write it, and she did a great job. She's a great writer. And Sid Speltz did the layouts for me, and very expensive. It was a very expensive process just publishing this I self-published it, but I sold out the first edition like 1,000 copies or something. And so then I published it again with new pieces, And it's been selling good. You know, most people that come in here that have been here for the first time will buy a book, and then it's got the map in it that shows you where all the pieces are. And so people want to have that and go see these pieces in person. So it's been surprising, that it's done as well as it has. And every once in a while I'll get an order off my website or something for it. So it's just a part of the marketing thing. I think it was a smart move because to get that book out there before someone else did a book on their scrap metal art or whatever. So to be the first in some of those things is important because then it establishes you in that. If you're the first one they saw, you just as well be the only one.
Right. Because everybody else is copying you at that point. Yeah.
I think that was a smart move. And, but it was a lot of work. And I'm thinking when I run out of this last edition, what am I going to do? I'll probably do another one, but I told myself I wasn't. I told myself, this is it. I'm not going to keep doing this, but if it works and it's profitable, you know, it's probably a good idea.
Outside of your website, social media, you produced this book, you had calendars. What other marketing things do you do? Is there anything else that you do that has been successful or that you've tried in the past? Maybe you're not currently doing it, but was successful in the past?
I talked about the videos. I do these little videos on YouTube that a couple of those have done pretty good. But as far as something that I can make some money off of, I really, if I get too many things going, then I get taken away from the welding shop. So the main thing that really is going to pay off for me is to keep going with the sculpture thing and keep pushing the envelope there. And I think there are little marketing things that I have some little things in the gift shop here, some coffee mugs and some t-shirts and stuff, but that's just to keep the heat bill paid, which we could really use some heat right now. It's cold in here.
It is getting a little chilly. Sorry about that.
But I think the book is kind of the main thing other than the sculptures themselves.
Do you have a favorite piece that you have a certain affinity for, or?
I do. It's called Black Hawk, and it's a plow horse, a draft horse pulling a plow. And my mom loves draft horses, and they have these big feet, and they're muscly, but yet they can be so gentle. They're like a gentle giant. I did a sculpture of this draft horse pulling a plow, and I set up a photo shoot behind my house. And I was going to have a couple old farmer type guys come and stand behind the plow, and I was going to make this cool photo, you know, because I was thinking of this book. I want to have some cool photos in this book. So I had my stepdad, and then I had this Russell on back come and stand there, and they'd come up and they just kind of stood there. You know, they didn't really, it just looked like somebody was standing there. So then I set up the camera and did it myself, and I walked into the frame and I took a whole bunch of pictures. And so I did get a picture of me behind the plow, and it looks like this thing is really happening, you know. So it's kind of an interesting, that has really taken off. That's been a really smart marketing thing, to have a photo on the internet. It's all on the internet. Everything, marketing with art, if you're not on the internet and pushing it, you have to have some images on the internet that are going to take off. That's just the way it is. And then people might want to see it in person type of thing. That's my favorite piece is Black Hawk, and the plow. I got that plow from a very special person here. Don Benson gave it to me, and that plow meant a lot to him and his family history. And he brought it with him. His family brought it with him from Minnesota. And so we have an ongoing joke that his son, Randy, is my brother-in-law. And he's like, I can't believe my dad gave you that plow. And so we got to go to New Hampshire now to visit it, you know, because that's where the sculpture is. But horses are kind of my thing. I I really try when I do sculptures of animals. Horses are the one thing that I really feel connected to, and I grew up around, and I've been kicked by them, bucked off, and struck and bit, and so you become very familiar with their body language after a while, and can put that into a sculpture. It really helps the piece come to life.
Yeah, you have to have like a sense of anatomy when you're doing this, just to get the leg position just right, and how and I love the way you do it, because you do it with the metal, and it looks like it's the muscle of the animal.
Yeah, I really work at that, and I done enough sculpting in wax and clay to really develop my knowledge of the anatomy. And so the 10 years of sculpting in clay before I started doing these scrap metal pieces helped develop that. And I'm fascinated with how animals are put together and how they move. And you notice when you're growing up a colt, if you sell quarter horses, the colt that's moving really good and really bouncing and really athletic, that's the one everybody wants, And the one that kind of doesn't have that straight leg or certain things, you learn all that stuff. And so you learn what makes animals the athletic critters that they are.
Yeah.
I was just handed this bookmark by Tonette, and are these something that you give to people that come? I think this is really smart. So this actually has a picture of the sculpture that John was just talking about, Blackhawk.
Yeah, it's a bookmark, and I put it in each book that people buy. And then it's also like a business card, and it's the photo of me behind the plow, and then this draft horse is pulling the plow. And it's in black and white, so it kind of looks like you have to kind of take a double take, because it just looks like somebody's plowing their field, and then you look at the horse and it's made out of this old antique farm equipment. One of my good friends says, we're kind of still stuck in the Depression here. People eat a lot of canned food here. Our grandparents are survivors of the Depression, and you that just trickles down to all of us. And that piece kind of speaks to that age or to that time, being it's in some of the prints that I've done are in black and white with that. And I think that is an interesting part of American history, is those really tough times where people really struggled, but it was on the verge of cars taking over. And so it was kind of like, there is a transition. There's a transition time there where things went from horse-drawn to mechanized. And so now I'm making sculptures out of all these different discarded mechanized pieces.
Reflecting of the prehistory of that. That's what's kind of ironic in a sense. Is there any of those pieces that you feel are autobiographical that you've done that tells a story about John Lopez?
Yeah, it's definitely when I do the horses, I think it's an autobiographical. I always remember the things that my dad would point out to us, or if he was showing a horse to one of the neighbors, different things he would do. He would take his hat off and he'd throw his hat at them, at their feet, and they would spook and fart and run off. And you could really see how a horse could move then. And if they stumbled and fell to the ground, that would be embarrassing. But if they bounced off like a deer and it was like, whoa, wow, that horse has really got a good athletic ability. So whenever I do a horse, I'm thinking subconsciously about how my dad talked about horses and how he found out some of these things. And cowboys and horse people are all kind of the same. They all speak the same language. So horses, like I said, the horse thing is very probably the closest thing to an autobiographical thing that I can pick up on.
This bookmark is actually a really great marketing piece. I think that's really smart. It's a business card, but it's a bookmark somebody can take with them, and I think that's it's wonderful.
Yeah, and it sticks to your ribs, or it sticks to your, it sticks with you. You remember that image. So Thank you.
Yeah. I always like to point out things, and thanks to Tanette for handing this to me, but that's a really great idea, a really spectacular marketing piece right there. And that's one of the things we always try to convey in these podcasts. We want to find out how people, the various things that they do, and kind of pass that on to other artists that are listening to this. Talk about we talked about Qatar and being part of that international exhibit. Talk about some of the other international work real quick that you have been able to be a part of and do.
One of the first international experiences I had with my work was I got contacted by Hermès to do a couple pieces for a display window for some of their American stores or their American sites, because they have stores all over the world. And so they wanted me to do, what did they want me to do? They wanted me to do a sculpture, and then I would ship it to them, and their department would put this leather on it and whatnot. And I thought, I would kind of like to do the whole thing, So they said, okay, we'll fly you to Paris, and you can go through our workshop and pick out what you want. And then they shipped it to me. And so then when I did the sculpture, then I integrate these bits and pieces of Hermès that they no longer used in their purses or their shops. So that's
a pretty cool project.
That was really cool, because I didn't know Hermès. I like the Birkin bag, and it was a higher end thing you don't hear about a lot here.
Right.
So yeah, that was really cool. And then I went to Monaco this spring on a different job. I was commissioned to do a life-size Oscar, a sculpture of the Oscar awards, for a Grace Kelly tribute. It was going to be her 90th birthday. And they put together this art show that was going to pull in these artists from the United States, because she's American. And that was really cool. I got to meet the Prince of Monaco, Prince Albert II. And then while on that same trip, my sister Noelle was with me, and we were supposed to install a life-size bison in Rhodes, France at a zoo, but it's an animal park. So the bison wasn't there. It didn't show up till after we got home. But that was a really cool job, and so honored to have those experiences. And it seems kind of surreal that I have pieces overseas now, but
yeah,
those are some of the highlights.
So I'm going to ask you a Bob Ragland question. Bob Ragland is a longtime Denver artist. He paints. He also does sculpture with found objects. And so he's all about the business, and I love Bob. He's one of my favorite people. He's always posting these questions on Facebook, so I try to take those and because he's curious about what other artists do. And so this is my Bob Ragland question for you, and I've asked this to another artist, but I want to see what you have to say about it. What do you do with your money when you get a big paycheck?
I am a very conservative person. So I usually will just let it sit there.
Smart.
But recently I've been, in the last couple of years, this has only really happened to me in the last couple of years, where I make a certain amount of good money on a piece, and then there's something there, burning a hole in your pocket. So when I renovating this building, it cost a pretty penny, or publishing that book. So I usually try to do something that I can write off. But recently I've just been letting it sit there and just like trying not to do anything stupid, trying not to go spend it on a boat or whatever. But I'm good about that. I think I'm pretty good with my finances. I try to make improvements to my business somehow, buy a Bobcat or a new welder or something that can improve my business.
Okay.
That's
I
smart.
probably should take it and like go to Italy or something.
Go to Hawaii and
Yeah.
relax on the beach for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also want to mention that Bob Raglan referenced you in an article that you were in, and was really complimentary of your work. So
Yeah, he
Wow.
reposted the article on Facebook, and this is after Wes and Todd had arranged to meet with you and do this interview. And I immediately commented back. I'm like, "Hey, we're going to South Dakota and we're interviewing this guy." So that was kind of cool.
Yeah,
how
what an honor.
those things happen. Yeah. So,
That's nice.
and also your answer, I think, would be Bob Raglan approved for that question.
Most definitely.
Definitely. Wes, do you have anything?
I had
else
a
that you
question. So you did U.S. grant, right? In the presidents down at.
Yep.
So how did you tint that blue?
Well, the patina, I used acrylic paint, and you water down this acrylic,
Okay.
and to where it's just this watery kind of a soup. And I heated the piece up, and then you can kind of burn it on.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's like a patina. And sometimes you can do it with a chemical and change it at the piece at a molecular level. But I did that one with acrylic, and it didn't last. It's still blue, but it's kind of darkened now to where it's not as obvious. But that, he's got that Civil War uniform on, and
Yeah.
it really kind of helped give the piece a real pop.
Well, and it separated from everything else. I really like that one a lot. And of course, the John F. Kennedy one with John Jr.
Yep.
That was an amazing piece as well that you did.
Yeah. And that was a very stressful piece because I put a lot of pressure on myself. And we each one of us on the project got to do a president that was really famous.
Mm-hmm.
And John Kennedy was mine. And I stressed over whether I did a good enough job on the portrait of him. Because it would be a nightmare to have to talk to everybody in town and be like, now which one was that? Or,
Right. And why the little kid?
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah. So, and I have
you.
to say, like I'm looking at Sitting Bull behind you, and it's amazing the accuracy that you have and I won't point out any fingers of sculptors, but there's sculptors that do pieces that you're like, yeah, it's just not quite there. I mean, it's close.
Yeah.
But your stuff is pretty much right on.
Well, yeah. The funny thing with the bronze, and when you go to those sculpture shows in Loveland and different things, you see a lot of bronze pieces that just shouldn't probably be cast. But because it's cast in bronze, people think, oh, it's passed some kind of amazing test and
Right.
it's a bronze now. So I'm going to buy it. But it's just like anything. If you can, your eye can sharpen enough to where you can see the good portrait artists from the ones that need to go back and take a few more classes. But I did take a portrait sculpting class in Loveland, and you learn what to look for when you're doing a portrait. And so there are things that you can do to improve that.
Yeah.
And I've really tried, and it's not where my very special gift is. And I appreciate you saying that, but I give it my best, I guess.
Do you do tours of your shop?
I do if people ask.
Okay.
Before I had the Kokomo, people would just drive into my yard. It was kind of a funny thing because these sculptures, these scrap metal sculptures, have really intrigued people, and they want to see them.
Yeah.
And so people would just show up in my yard. I don't know how they figured out. I suppose my address was on my website or something. So
Social media.
I don't like that as much. I like it when they show up at the Kokomo. And then if they ask, or if it's a school tour or something, I'll take them to my shop. But I would rather that they came to the Kokomo and felt like they had enough of an experience there that they didn't need to go to the shop, because it's dirty and there's a lot of peacock poop and it's okay.
Yeah.
It is interesting to see the pieces at the stage that they're in.
Yeah.
And I think students especially get a kick out of they really get to see, the nuts and bolts of the operation and kind of see, this is something I could do, or, this isn't just like snapping his fingers. There's a lot of physical labor that goes into this.
Yeah.
And you can see it when you walk into the shop. It's not a pretty picture.
I love to see the creative spaces as a photographer. I love walking into another artist's space and just see the work in progress. And, a lot of times it's the mess.
Yeah.
I just like seeing, it's like looking into the inner workings of their mind in some way,
Yeah.
And I love it. I think it's,
yeah, it is. It's, when I'm really, I don't know, there's different stages to each piece. And sometimes you hit this roadblock and it's just like, I will let the scrap metal I don't want to clean anything up because I might see something, oh my gosh, this would fit perfectly. So when it's all kind of out there, but then you can't walk, you got to make space on the floor so you can actually get around. So, my shop needs a good cleaning here.
Lots of tripping hazards.
Yes.
Not OSHA approved.
Not OSHA approved. And when you bring your kids, you got to be careful that they're not going to shake the tree and one of the glass apples is not going to fall on their head or something. So you got to think of that kind of stuff. And then different people have come out with their dogs and they're going to let their dog out and my peacocks go flying in 500 different directions. And that's not good because I've lost a few peacocks over that.
Oh, wow.
So I'd rather people just come to the Kokomo and
Right.
There's enough here to see.
It's a great space.
It's a beautiful space.
And I do give a lot of tours that there are different bus tours and stuff that come. And then I'll go ahead and my shop is only 3 miles out of town. So it's not that hard to take people out there if they want to. So
do you have tour buses that actually come through town and they'll just stop here at the Kokomo and you'll
ones that have made arrangements.
Okay.
I don't just get a bus doesn't just show up unannounced.
Gotcha.
It's usually like a school or now there is a tourism group that goes from Bismarck to Rapid City and they've kind of discovered me. So I'll become one of their stops now. And I'd like for that to happen more, any bus tours that are going from Mobridge or Bismarck or going on to the Black Hills.
I want to jump back a little bit. So and I was telling Todd this story and probably not doing it justice coming up here to see you. One of my favorite stories as a kid, I grew up in Sisseton, was the Hugh Glass story, where he gets mauled by the bear and he crawls all the way back to the Missouri River via the Grand River and then floats down to, I think, what is present day Yankton. Can you tell me about your work on that and if it was commissioned or something you did yourself, or can you just talk about that a little bit?
Well, Jim Hatzel is a good friend of mine, and he's kind of got his finger on the pulse of if there's ever going to be a movie made in South Dakota, or he's the guy that you contact. And so I was talking to him a couple years ago at the Black Hill Stock Show, and we got to talking about Hugh Glass or whatever, and he's like, yeah, there's a movie. There's a movie coming out, and Leonardo DiCaprio is going to play Hugh Glass. And I was like, what? Are they going to come to, film it here? So anyway, they didn't. Needless to say, they didn't. But I thought this is a great opportunity. If I can get this sculpture done, which I had wanted to do the sculpture of Hugh Glass anyway. So I really tried to develop this concept of how am I going to have this interaction of Hugh and this bear? What's that going to look like? So I started sculpting some models and I pushed to get this life-size piece of a grizzly bear attacking Hugh Glass and the gun and all this stuff ready for when the movie came out. And so they did, the studio did let us have a special screening here before the movie opened, which basically just let us show it early.
But rightly so. I mean, this happened in your backyard, basically here.
Yep.
This isn't something that happened in the Rocky Mountains. When we think of grizzly bears, we don't think of Lemmon, South Dakota. But back then, the 1830s, it was.
Right.
Yeah.
And I had, Kenny Tomac had told me that Lakita Shockley here in town was thinking about a rendezvous, that we needed to have a rendezvous of some kind. And so I met with her and said, you know what, this movie's coming out. I'm going to do this sculpture. She's decided, okay, well, let's do I've been wanting to do this rendezvous. Let's call it the Hugh Glass Rendezvous. And so then we unveiled the sculpture at our inaugural Hugh Glass Rendezvous. And then the movie came out in the winter. I think it was January or something. And we had a red carpet thing and I showed the sculpture. And so anything that you can do like that in a community, especially like Lemmon, to bring attention or to bring people in or to have fun, or it helps. And I saw an opportunity because Hugh Glass is such a cool story. And just the grizzly bear and just the whole idea of someone getting beat down to where you can hardly even walk. And in the story, it's so cool. And then it won all these Oscars. And so it never really did what I thought. It never really, you have to tell people, okay, you know who Hugh Glass is. And if they don't know, you can say, you remember The Revenant? You remember Leonardo DiCaprio? And then, oh yeah, Hugh Glass. But people that are really up on their history and are into the rendezvous thing, they know Hugh Glass.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, obviously because I have an affinity for this story. I don't know why, but probably because it was South Dakota and I was a kid in South Dakota. But, I was very disappointed when I seen the previews of the movie because, Hugh Glass was attacked in the summer or spring, I think. In the movie, it's wintertime. He's obviously in the mountains. And I was thinking, if you crawl on your belly to the river in the summer, it's hot, you're dehydrated, there's hostels for whatever you want to call that. I mean, it's an amazing story in itself, but yet Hollywood has a tendency to it's not good enough. Let's twist it around a little bit. So, but anyway, I have not seen the actual piece that you created. But I love the photos that I've seen of it, and it's I can only imagine it's a really amazing piece. So
I thought of a couple different ways of doing it. I thought I could do it right before or right at the moment that the bear notices Hugh and that Hugh sees the bear before any attack. And so you've got this moment of the bear standing up and looking, and Hugh's kind of like, oh boy, what's this going to be? And then I decided to go with the one where the bear is full on, like going in to protect her cubs. And Hugh's got the knife and he's got his hand back, and the knife is going to come down and he's going to get a good jab in, but you don't really know, how it's going to end. And there's the gun is lying on the floor or on the ground, and he got his first shot off. But action, I love action. And so anytime I do a sculpture, if I can put some action in it, that's my favorite thing to do.
And looking, once again, I haven't seen the real thing, but looking at the photos, you can feel the tension. You can see the movement and the action. I mean, it's a great piece. So thank you for representing Hugh Glass as a childhood.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
One of my heroes.
I appreciate that. And I took the sculpture out to where the Hugh Glass monument is. And that monument is just a plaque that basically tells a story. And so sometimes when people come to Lemmon, they think if they go out to the Hugh Glass site, they're going to see the sculpture, but the sculpture is in Lemmon at the Grand River Museum. So it's not out at the lake.
Is it outside? Can I see it today, or?
No, it's inside.
Okay.
It's inside, and the museum's closed for the season right now, but in the summertime, people come just to learn about Hugh Glass and the history. And people will drive out then to see the plaque that's out there and see the spot where he was mauled is actually underwater now. The Shade Hill Reservoir has been kind of flooded it, but there's a lot of history, so much history here. That's another reason to be here for me, is there's a lot to subject matter to draw from.
So John, as we start to wrap this up, is there anything that you're looking forward to in this year of 2020 that you'd like to talk about, like promote, big shows that you're doing, commission that you're doing, anything that is exciting on the horizon here?
One of the things that I'm trying to develop here at the Kokomo is this sculpture garden where Jerry's Hardware was, and trying to do something interesting that I can continually, my creative juices, like I like planting, I like plants, and I like that aspect of the sculpture garden. So I'm creating this tree. Like I said, I was working on this tree, and I'm going to unveil that this summer. And my friends from Nigeria, Jonathan and Dotun, are going to come back, and they've been coming here every summer for the last 5 years to do an art show on Father's Day weekend. And so I want to unveil that tree at the sculpture garden at that time and have them do their art show. And they've done several of the murals that are around here. And Dotun saw my work on Pinterest and decided that he wanted to come and work with me. And so we've developed a really interesting friendship and a partnership that the community of Lemmon really comes to look forward to when they come here, because we have this grand opening for their art show, and we have a food. St. Larry's Barbecue will have a barbecue. And so it's a fun time to celebrate. I look forward to summer because there's so many opportunities to have art openings and different things, and Lemmon comes back to life, and the trees bloom and the grass is growing and the birds are singing. So yeah, a lot to look forward to.
And last but not least, we mentioned your website at the very beginning, which is johnlopezstudio.com. Where else can people find you? And if they want to contact you for a commission or just contact you in general, how do they go about that?
Well, I have an email. That's probably the best way. johnlopezstudio@gmail.com. And that's the best way to get a hold of me, is shoot me an email. And but my website's got everything. I think it's got my email, my phone number, everything. So that's a good way to start. And you can send me email through my website.
Okay. And you're on Instagram?
I'm on Instagram, Facebook. I think for now that's probably it. Yeah. Instagram's kind of I stopped posting a lot of stuff on Facebook, but for my sculptures and the process and different, my day-to-day workings, I do that on Instagram.
Okay.
And I think it's John Lopez Studio or John Lopez Sculptures.
We'll put a link.
Yeah, we'll figure that out,
Yeah.
and we'll make sure that all those links are available to people so they can check out your work.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
John, thank you so much. We really appreciate you giving the time, taking time out of your day away from your work and anything else you might have had going on today to sit down and talk with us. And
yeah,
really
you bet.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, and I have people down in Rapid that haven't listened to our podcast. They said, well, when John Lopez is on, let me know and I'll listen. And I'm like, okay, if you're not going to listen to anyone, listen to his then.
Okay.
But so, yeah, there's you got a huge fan base down there, obviously. So, yeah, it's exciting. So once again, thank you very much. And we really appreciate your time that you've spent with us today.
Yeah, you bet.
On behalf of the Tenet Podcast, this is Wes.
And this is Todd Pearson.
Thanks for joining us.
This is Tenet.